So when we look at this in sort of a bigger picture, one of the things that we see is when people are injured in some way, shape, or another, whether that injury is a physical injury or an emotional injury or a spiritual crisis, it doesn't really matter. There's some sort of insult or assault that overwhelms the body in some way. And when that happens, people shift mindsets and they go into states of judgment, either about themselves or the world around them. We might see this in patients who've experienced some kind of violation of boundaries or are now living with the emotional fallout of violating someone else's boundaries. We might see issues around this assault or insult in terms of shaming or neglect or abandonment. Something happens that puts the body into a cascade of response to crisis. So the insult happens, the body has a reaction. That reaction is typically pre-thought. It is reflexive in nature. It happens without us having to direct it in some way, shape, or form. And that reaction typically involves some kind of shock, some kind of fragmentation. Once that occurs, the body goes into survival mode. It recognizes that there's a huge threat. Doesn't even matter how big the threat is or how real the threat is. The body determines there is a threat. The brain stem in particular, determines there's some kind of survival threat, and it responds, typically in the form of fight, flight, or freeze. When that happens, the goal is always to protect the emperor. So we move into, from that reaction, some form of self-preservation. And so the pericardium loop, the pericardium system, steps in because its job is to bear the difficult things, to bear the unbearable, to protect the emperor at all costs. And so the pericardium loop now starts to shut down. It rallies the troops to guard the emperor. So instead of having more fluid and full circulation in the body starts to shut down and get tighter and get more defensive. And this comes with it the sort of quality of rejection, denial, withdrawal, anything to protect the emperor. What follows that is either suppression, which is a conscious choice to ignore an emotional experience, or repression, which is an unconscious choice to respond to some kind of crisis, all in service of the emperor. And when we begin to think about this as all in service of the emperor, what we're also saying is this is all in service of sovereignty, maintaining agency. And then we can live with that latency for a period of time, or we can continue to find ways to work with the experience to try to process it and get rid of it. So how somatization occurs, which is such a common response to a disruption of the qi mechanism, is when the yin qi doesn't deal with the emotional component of this, when the yuan qi cannot deal with the thought process, the belief system associated with it. They both try to deal with these things as well as they can. They both try to process the experience. And when they fail, they take that experience and they push it out into the superficial tissues. Once again, because sometimes physical pain or discomfort is easier to deal with than emotional pain. It's easy if you physically hurt to take a couple of Advil and think the problem is gone. But when you're in a state of emotional crisis, it becomes more challenging to figure out how to deal with that or how to moderate it in some way, shape, or form.